What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero, putting America first, second, and third. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show here. It is Wednesday, July 6th, 2011, middle of the week, hump day, starting that long, slow slide down to Pauhana Friday and another relaxing weekend, probably a little more relaxing than last weekend, obviously, with all the partying and everything going on. The phone lines are open, 877-342-6673, 877-342-6673. Brett is in the control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble, and ready for your phone calls to come on in, put you on the air, talk about whatever you want to talk about today. Now, I'm going to give you a little bit of an apology up front. I'm in kind of a cranky mood today. Cranky. And the reason is I was up all night, didn't get any sleep. I had just this absolute killer migraine headache of the type that I normally get when I get like a lot of MSG, monosodium glutamate, in my diet, which I try to avoid for that very reason. And so went back and looked through all the little things that were used for dinner last night and settled on this barbecue sauce. And I read the label very carefully, and there's, no MSG listed there, or any of its various names like autolyzed yeast extract or hydrolyzed protein, or any of the dozen or so names that they have there. So I get in touch with the company that makes this product, and I say, is there monosodium glutamate in there? And they say, oh, yeah, of course it is. That's what makes it so tasty. And I said, well, it's not on the label. And they said, oh, yes, it is. It's listed as natural flavoring. That's the new euphemism there. And I mention that not to whine and cry about MSG and everything, but, there's no secret to the fact that America's obesity epidemic is very much tied in with all these chemicals that are put into the food to make you want to eat and then buy more. Monosodium glutamate is advertised as a flavor enhancer. We know that it basically interferes with the brain's signal that says, I've eaten enough. And that's why food manufacturers love it so much. It's inexpensive. They dump it in there. And believe it or not, for people who are suffering eating disorders, like especially the elderly who aren't eating enough, MSG is actually prescribed to get them to eat more. So that's how powerful it is. It's literally a drug. They're drugging the food to make you eat more. Aspartame, sold as a diet aid, actually makes you crave more carbohydrates. We all know about the synthetic bovine growth hormone and all this other stuff going on and on. Now, this is the preface to the story I wanted to start with today. As you know, more and more people, more and more communities are getting into local farming, home farming, community farming, basically trying to make sure they have a supply of food because things are getting very, very flaky out there in corporate food transport land. And amazingly enough, in their devotion to make sure that we remain dependent on large food corporations, the United States government is coming down very hard on small family farms and small dairies that, are trying to sell raw milk products. And basically they want to sell food the way it comes out of the ground or out of the cow or out of the chicken, the way has been done for tens of thousands of years. All this new processing stuff is only a few hundred years old. It's not the way we have evolved. It's not the kind of food that we've always known as we evolve. It's all a recent stuff, but it's the big corporate thing. And so we've got this situation where farmers markets are now being subject to this incredible amount of draconian governmental control in order to sell your homegrown vegetables or fruit. In other words, to sell stuff that just came out of the ground, the way has been going on for millions of years on planet Earth. Okay, you have to now submit a crop plan to government inspectors. You must have your garden subject to safety inspection by some government bureaucrat. There's all these contract agreements you have to go out and go through, business arrangements to set up and be taxed and everything. And there's filing fees and regulatory compliance, and the government must certify that you are organic and give you a permit to grow and sell your food, because it might not be safe if the government doesn't put a little gold stamp on it. So they're basically trying to sell this whole thing over consumer safety. And yet these are the same regulators that allow aspartame to be used as an artificial sweetener, and we know there's all kinds of medical problems with that. It can literally create symptoms like Parkinson's disease, in people. There's a documentary out there called Sweet Misery that just underscores all the problems people sensitive to aspartame are experiencing. And doctors are misdiagnosing them because they don't understand it's the aspartame. Believe it or not, aspartame, before it was approved as a sweetener, was listed as a biological weapon because it overexcites your brain cells to the point where it starts burning out neurotransmitters. You know, these same people saying that they have to come in and make sure that the organically grown food is safe for you to eat are the same ones who allowed fluoride, to be dumped in the water supply. We're going to be talking about that a little bit later. They're the ones who are putting high fructose corn syrup into products, and now they're allowing the industry to say, oh, it's corn sugar. They don't even have to name it as high fructose anymore. And they're going along with this idea, well, it's just sugar and, you know, won't really matter one way or the other. There's all these chemicals in the food here that are not necessarily good for you. They're good for the industries. In fact, here's one that's going to wake you up a little bit. The FDA actually allows large food corporations to add processed wood pulp to their food as a food additive to bulk it up. So you think you're getting more when you buy whatever you're buying. And it's cellulose. It's all these various cellulose products. And cellulose is the stuff that keeps the trees from bending over under gravity. So they're basically saying it's okay to feed you sawdust. Why? Well, it won't hurt you. There's no nutritional value. But they're allowing these food companies to put it in there. And it's in companies like, Pepsi, Kellogg's, Weight Watchers, General Mills, McDonald's, Sara Lee, Taco Bell, which is already famous for the meat-flavored substance in their tacos they're not allowed to call meat anymore, because it was so full of fillers. Jack in the Box, Kraft Foods, Pizza Hut, Wendy's, Arby's, Sonic, Dole, Kentucky Fried Chicken, and Nestle, to name a few. And the article and the documentation about all that is linked at whatreallyhappened.com, so you can take a look at that today. So the U.S. government is allowing these big food corporations to put all these chemicals and additives in your food, some of which are demonstrably bad for you. But when people want to set up their own little garden in their community and grow healthy organic food, the government comes in with all these regulations. Oh, you got to fill out this form. You got to be inspected. We have to come in and say that this is okay to sell. And remember what I said before the 4th of July holiday, the reason it's called Independence Day as opposed to Liberty Day or Freedom Day is because what we're celebrating is the ability to operate independently of a government. And of course, government, on the other hand, wants you to be dependent on them for everything, including your food and your water. If you have to go to the government and get your loaf of Soylent Red, you will do as you are told. You will be an obedient little slave. I mean, the Christian missionaries pulled this stunt down on the island of Tahiti, where they went in and they set up all these plantations to grow crops and do export and get very, very rich on the backs of the native laborers. And the native laborers said, we don't have to work for you. There's food all over the place just for the taking. Your God, according, has grown all these breadfruit trees. Remember Mutiny on the Bounty, that whole thing. Your God, the God that you claim has made all things to happen, grew all these breadfruit trees all over Tahiti. We just got to reach up and pick one and eat one, or go fishing, and we've got all the food we need. And the rest of the time we can just relax and have fun. And the Christian missionary said, well, by golly, we're going to fix that. Our God did not intend for anybody to sit around and just relax and not have to work from, dawn to dusk for us clergymen. And they burned down the breadfruit trees. That's why today on Tahiti it's very hard to find any of them. That was like the predominant food crop at the time, William Bligh and the Bounty crew showed up. And the Christian missionaries burned it down. Why? Because if there wasn't a free food source, though, by golly, those Tahitian natives are going to have to come work on the plantations owned by the clergy. And so that's how this works. If the government can prevent you legally or even just by force of arms from growing your own food, then you have to go and bow and prostrate yourself before the corporate food providers, who will give you food as long as you have these little paper tickets that you have been given for working for some of the other corporate masters. That's what dependency means, forced dependency on the government. And independence means being able to live without a government. That's what freedom is. And that's why we have this absurd dichotomy of the U.S. government telling big corporations that they can put sawdust in your food as a filler to save money and make more profit, and while they're telling organic farmers who are trying to grow food the good old-fashioned way that, oh, no, you've got to fill out all these forms, and you've got to have stickers, and you've got to have permits, and you've got to have a license, because we've got to protect the health of the American people. Meanwhile, you know those protein bars, the breakfast bars, anything with bar form, to get it to stick together, there's this soy protein they use as kind of a food glue. They call it soy protein isolate. It's a primary ingredient in these things. And its manufacturing process involves a toxic solvent called hexane, which is showing up in the final manufactured product. So here we have a government that says, yeah, hexane is okay for people to eat, but by golly, you'd better not feed them an organic grown ear of corn without our permission. We're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. I'm reading my email. Somebody's writing and saying, I remember reading in my third grade social studies book about the breadfruit trees in the South Pacific, and I used to get hungry reading about it and wondered what it tasted like. Actually, they taste pretty bland. They were called breadfruit tree just because it was considered a bread, a bread stuff. And the reason why the whole mutiny in the bounty thing came about was they wanted to grab a bunch of these trees from Tahiti and transplant them to the slave plantations in the New World to grow to feed the slaves. It wasn't even considered appropriate food, for normal citizens. It was simply the cheapest possible fodder they could feed to the slaves. Kind of like the FDA doing sawdust to us now. So anyway, we're talking about the food safety, and we're talking about this hexane, which is a petroleum distillate. It's used in the manufacturing of this soy protein isolate that glues together anything that's in bar form, granola bars, health bars, whatever. And it can actually cause nerve damage. But the FDA says, yeah, sure, go on, why not? I mean, after all, compared to what you're getting in that Gulf of Mexico seafood here, and all the radiation, what's a little hexane here? All right, moving right along here. Now, I mentioned this before about this whole fluoride situation. Fluoride has been put in our water for a long time. We're very lucky here in Hawaii we don't have it. The overwhelming public opposition and fluoridation was discontinued many, many years ago. It is known it's a mild tranquilizer. It will calm you down, dope you out, like Soma, if you've read Brave New World by Aldous Huxley, where the entire population is constantly kept tranquilized so they don't murder the leadership. It's kind of like that. Fluoride applied topically on your teeth can, in fact, help with tooth decay, but there's absolutely no evidence that drinking it in your water in any way affects tooth decay at all. It's simply not proven. There's no evidence to support it. They just said, sure, pour the fluoride into the people. Now we're finding out here, you're probably aware, indirectly from all these lawsuits from these ambulance-chasing law firms that are saying, if you've had a problem with your hip or knee artificial joint, boy, there's a scary thought. I mean, you get one of these put in you and it turns out to have a manufacturing defect. I'm sorry, we have to recall your kneecap. Going to have to send you back to the factory. And they're having some problems with them because, like everything else in this world, they're value engineered. And so forth and so on. But you have to start wondering, why are so many people needing these knee and hip surgeries and replacement joints and everything? Is it really because we're living longer or we're not exercising enough? And it turns out that if you map the incidence or requirement for knee and hip replacement with these artificial joints, it lines up with the communities with the most fluoride in their water. Because it turns out if you're spending your entire life drinking fluoride, it is eroding that very smooth, glassy part of the joint of the bone called the menial crest. That's the part that actually glides over each other, and as that starts to erode, you get into some serious problems. And it can look very, very similar to arthritis. But they're just now realizing that all the baby boomers who are having these joint problems has nothing to do with them. They didn't do anything. It's the fluoride in the water. It's not that they're overweight. Their joints should be able to hold whatever their weight happens to be, unless they weigh 800 pounds, and has nothing to do with exercise. They're being poisoned by the tap water, which is authorized by the same government saying, don't you dare sell them a vine-ripened tomato without our permission. And it's all about profits. It's all about money. It's all about maintaining the population's dependency on corporations. Because the goal of any government in history is to extract the maximum amount of work product from the population for the absolute least amount of upkeep. Feed them cheap, work them hard. Work them until they drop. You're already seeing that attitude here in the United States government. They're talking about raising the retirement age, and nobody has retirement benefits because they've already sucked them all out. And basically, the U.S. government has embezzled your retirement out of Social Security and spent it to balance the books, and it still didn't save the situation. And it can't, because as long as you have a private central bank issuing the public currency at interest, it is doomed to crash eventually. And all politics is finding some sucker to pick up the losses, which is probably going to be you and me and our children and our grandchildren here. Now, I wasn't going to talk about Casey Anthony at all because I don't care. I mean, there's a lot of murder and a lot of mayhem, and I didn't think it was all that big a deal. But I am noticing that the corporate media seems to have been caught off guard by this jury verdict. I'm hearing a lot of people saying, well, we know she's guilty. They should have convicted. They should have done this. And the harangue is going on. And as I predicted, with the case already over and the verdict in, the corporate media is still trying to milk this for all it's worth. They're already doing retrospective. Hey, look back at all the characters in the Casey Anthony case. And they're turning this into another permanent member of the distracting story stable, if you will. Remember John Benet Ramsey? How long ago that happened? And still, you go by the supermarket tabloids, a new breakthrough in the John Benet Ramsey case. I mean, John Benet's dead. Her mother's dead. The people who probably did it are all dead and gone, and they're still going to keep waving this at you because they don't want to talk about the economy and they don't want to talk about the wars. And they certainly, this last week, nobody wanted to talk about how Israel got Greece to block the aid flotilla. It's a big story everywhere else in the world, and on the alternative media, not a mention on the American TV news networks. It's all Casey Anthony all the time. And the only reason I really wanted to bring this up this time is I'm hearing all of these people, including my preceding host, going on saying, I'm convinced she's guilty, and they should do something about it. No, they shouldn't. The reason we have a jury system in this country is operating on the theory that it's better to let 10 guilty people go free than to condemn and convict a single innocent person. If you support the jury system of trial, then you have to accept the fact that every once in a while somebody who did something guilty is going to get away, like O.J. And you accept that as the price to make sure that innocent people are not wrongfully prosecuted and sent to be tortured. And if you're not willing to accept that, then you are a poor excuse for an American. We're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We had another big earthquake down in New Zealand, in the Kermadec Islands, 7.8. They did have a tsunami warning issued. My understanding is as of now, that has now been canceled. They're not expecting there to be any problems from that. Of course, the real issue with these quakes that are happening along these subsea trenches, it's never the quake itself that's going to make the really big tsunamis. It's if there's a sudden displacement of large amounts of undersea flooring, like a trench wall collapses or something like that. That's where the really bad tsunamis come from. There's this volcano in the Atlantic in the Canary Islands, Cumbre Vieja, I believe it's called. The whole western side of that volcano is actually starting to slide down. And if it ever lets go all at once into the Atlantic Ocean, the tsunami from that will wipe out the entire eastern seaboard of the United States of America. So if there really were a real terrorist out there with a nuclear warhead, they don't have to worry about smuggling it into the United States of America. Just go down in one of those lava tubes in that volcano below the water table, set it off, the steam pressure will blow the whole western half of that thing off into the ocean. So, anyway, I want to talk a little bit about the situation over in Greece and Gaza. We still have no idea where these two French ships are that are in international waters. Obviously, they're keeping their location and progress very much a secret, but we know that one ship successfully got out of the harbor in Greece, and the other one departed from Corsica. And they're on their way to Gaza right now. A lot of the other flotilla people have already had to go home. They only had so much time commitment they could do to this thing, and Israel's celebrating and saying, we did it, we continued the starvation. And what's kind of interesting is to see all their propagandists all over the net saying, well, those Gazans, they fired 10,000 rockets at us. And actually, no, even Israel's own government says that during the times when the ceasefire is not being honored, It's maybe 15 rockets a month, and they're bottle rockets. They're glorified bottle rockets. And they hit empty lots 9 times out of 10, which is why a lot of people think these are actually being fired by agents provocateurs, so that Israel has a justification for things like cast lead. But the Israeli propagandists are always trying to exaggerate all these things about all the stuff that's going on, because they're trying to basically sell the idea that this is a really cool thing to do to starve this entire area of the planet. And it isn't. Israel's own internal government documents say that this has nothing to do with security. You've got Israel, the 6th most powerful nuclear-armed nation on Earth, is quaking in fear from this little tiny Gaza, that they might get Oreo cookies to hurl over the wall. And it makes, it's absurd. It's like the United States continuing to pretend to be threatened by little tiny Cuba. It's just pure vindictive spite. Now, even though most of the ships of the Gaza flotilla did not make it to Gaza this time, and there's still going to be some kind of a confrontation involving the French ships, Vive la France, the flotillas have succeeded in a very real way, because all of these countries around the world got to see how their leaders reacted to this situation. It's a litmus test. It's a litmus test. You get the little piece of paper, you dip it in your government, and if it comes out blue, it means your government has sold out to Israel and it's time to get a new government. So we're seeing governments like Ireland and Malaysia standing up and saying that this is wrong to go on starving Gaza, and it is wrong, not to mention illegal, for Greece to block the ships. Then you have Greece, which caved into Israeli pressure, and the United States saying, yeah, absolutely, yes, go ahead, jail the flotilla people. How dare they take cookies into the children of Gaza? And so everybody gets to look at the degree to which their government has already been subverted by Israel, and that is a very good thing. Because the fastest way to bring down a dictatorship is to force them to act like one where everybody can see it. And this last weekend, everybody around the world got to take a really good look at their own government and see how they behaved on this humanitarian issue. Large numbers of the government were basically thinking humanely and saying, yeah, the food's got to get in there. This blockade is nonsense. And the governments that didn't, now the people who live there know that their government has been subverted, as much as the United States has, by bribery, by coercion, by blackmail, by honey trapping, however it's done, by the nation of Israel. And in that context, this flotilla has been an absolute outstanding success. Because we turned the rock over and we see the rot and corruption underneath. Now, Israel's propagandists are getting really, really desperate to say, oh, Gaza doesn't need aid. And I'm not kidding you. This was on Glenn Beck's website earlier today. Gaza is in the lap of luxury. Israeli aid includes daily shipment of Mercedes and jacuzzis. I'm not kidding you, okay? And there was this article about how wonderful life is in Gaza, and they're really not in any trouble at all, and they show these pictures from this hotel. And it's a very plush hotel. And they said, see, if this is what they have in Gaza, then they can't be suffering at all, can they? Now, my reply to this, and I posted it at Glenn Beck's website. I don't know if it's ever been published or put up there, but I'm going to tell you what my reply to that is. If I showed you photos of Beverly Hills, California, would you believe me if I claimed that this represented the standard of living for all of the United States of America? Of course not. You're smart enough to realize that what is not being shown is living conditions in Appalachia, or even just... Okay, hang on a second. We're getting some input from the music there we go. We're fine now. So, would you believe me if okay, what's not being shown is Appalachia or even South Central Los Angeles. Now, back in 1948, 1949, West Berlin was a beautiful city. Had a lot of old, wonderful, classic buildings, and taking pictures of it, you would say it's a beautiful, modern, up-to-date city. And you couldn't see in the pictures the starvation imposed by the Soviet Union to force West Berlin to abandon their elected government and accept Soviet rule through their proxy in East Germany. But the world refused to allow a dictatorship to starve people into accepting their rule. And the people of the world, including the United States of America, mounted the Berlin airlift. until the Soviet Union abandoned their blockade. They quit, pulled up their little security gates, and they went home. And all during that time, during the Berlin airlift, there were places all over West Berlin where you could have taken pictures that made it look like life was doing really well there. Because you're looking at the artifacts from before the starvation blockade, and the same thing is going on in Gaza. They're taking pictures of things that were built before the starvation blockade and trying to use them to say, see, life is great, you don't need to give the Gazans anything at all. It's a lie. It's an absolute lie. Israel is trying to starve the Gazans into abandoning their elected government and accepting foreign rule. And we didn't stand for it before in 1949. We shouldn't be standing for it now here in 2011. The aid flotillas are the modern version of the heroic Berlin airlift, and they are deserving of our support. And photos of hotels built before Israel's blockades do not fool us. In fact, it's almost insulting that somebody in Israel thought that it might. So, all right, we're going to take a break for commercials, and we will be right back.
We will not go down in the night without a fight. You can burn up our mosques and our homes and our schools, but our spirit will never die. We will not go down in Gaza tonight.
And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And I want to finish up on the situation with Israel, just to show you that there's never any gratitude. No matter what you do for Israel, they are never going to be grateful. The attitude is always, well, sure, that was yesterday. What have you done for us today? Now, United Nations General Secretary Ban Ki-moon basically abandoned his duties as international arbiter and sided with Israel, saying, you can blockade Gaza and we'll take the aid and deliver it for them through official correct channels through Israel, which of course is nonsense. It's a way of making it look like the aid is getting to Gaza, even though last year when they ran the aid through Ashdod, most of it just sat on the docks until it was rotted, and then only then was it sent in there. And so after all of that, after Ban Ki-moon basically, caved into Israel and did everything the way Israel wanted it to be done, he had the temerity, the absolute temerity, to issue a report that criticized Israel for its handling of incidents on the border with Lebanon on May 15th, which is Nakba Day. Now, Nakba is the tragedy. It's a commemoration. It's a remembrance of the day that Israel basically came in and took everybody's land and said, you may have lived here before, but God says we get this land, so get the heck out. And the bulldozers started rolling. And Israel, which demands that Holocaust education be taught around the world, has made it a crime to even mention the Nakba within Israel. No. You can't talk about the Nazis. Talk about Hitler. Don't talk about us taking your land, even though we took your land. So there was a confrontation with Lebanon on May 15th that resulted in some deaths. And the United Nations official report from Ban Ki-moon concluded the Israeli soldiers used disproportionate force against Lebanese demonstrators, which is to say they just opened fire on them. The Israelis shot across the border into Lebanon and killed 7 demonstrators. Now, Israel's attitude is, well, we don't care where the concrete and chain link fence goes. We know the border is actually further in. So those protesters were actually on Israeli land and we had the right to shoot them, blah, 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 blah. So Israel is now in high dudgeon. They're furious with the United Nations. How dare they? I mean, how dare they? How dare they dare to dare? How dare they criticize Israel? And I'm not kidding. This is Israel's attitude. And I will demonstrate that with a quote from Ariel Sharon. And this is a direct quote. Israel may have the right to put others on trial, but certainly no one has the right to put the Jewish people or the state of Israel on trial. End quote. That's the attitude that we see from Israel all the time. Israel can do whatever it wants, and nobody has a right to criticize, because then you're just being a Hitler lover, Jew hater, anti-Semite. But Israel presumes the right to judge everybody else on planet Earth and to even go into other people's countries and execute people they think need executing. It's an open secret. They have assassination squads running around the world. There have even been some reported inside the United States of America. And it's that double standard which lies at the heart of all this friction. It's like, Israel going on about how they have a right to exist. But when the Palestinians say, don't we have a right to exist in existence? Of course not. Of course you don't. We demand you recognize our right to exist. In Palestine, and this is honestly true, the Palestinian leadership has said they will recognize Israel's right to exist as soon as Israel recognizes Palestine's right to exist. And Israel says, no, we're not going to do that. We have a right to exist, but you don't. It's just like Ariel Sharon saying, we have the right to judge everybody else, but you have no right to judge us. They're not seeing themselves as part of the human race. They're not seeing themselves as part of the family of man. They're not seeing themselves as part of the community of nations. There's one set of rules for Israel, which is basically they can get away with anything, and there's another set of rules that everybody else is supposed to follow to keep them in their place. It's like this congressman from Long Island was saying the other day that any attempt to get Israel to comply with international law is really just another form of anti-Semitism. That's how completely wacko-bananas this whole attitude problem is reached. And they have succeeded in subverting most of the United States government, along with governments around the world, and the proof of that is the U.S. House of Representatives today issued a warning to Palestinians that if Palestine pursues UN recognition of a state without Israel's permission, that the United States will cut off all financial aid to Palestine. Now, we know Israel will never, ever grant Palestine a right to statehood. We have no end of Israeli leaders insisting there's no such thing as Palestine. There's no such thing as Palestinians. They don't exist. And yet we can go back to maps from the Middle Ages, from ancient times, and we see Palestine is on there. But the official policy of Israel is Palestine never existed. It was a land without a people before the Israelis showed up. That literally is their official dogma. And so now the U.S. House of Representatives, the finest representatives that money can buy, is out there threatening Palestine that they'll stop what little meager funding is being sent in there if Palestine dares stand up and declare themselves a state, even though that's exactly how Israel came into being. Because remember, when the United Nations said we need we need a solution to this problem and all this unhappiness over there, and they said, okay, we will have a partition plan. This part will be the state of Israel, and this part will be the state of Palestine. And Israel said, no, you can't do that. We want it all, especially Jerusalem. And so they rejected the United Nations plan for a two-state solution. David Ben-Gurion simply said, I declare Israel to be in existence. 24 hours later, Harry Truman, goaded by Chaim Weizmann, said the United States recognizes the new government of Israel, and that was it. That's how Israel came into being. And the irony here is that the United States government is now denying to Palestine, or threatening them, not to use the same method to come into being as a state that Israel used and the United States recognized. That's the hypocrisy at the heart of this whole thing. And now they're using the little bit of foreign aid. The United States does send money to Palestine just to basically keep them under control. Remember what I said about keeping somebody dependent on the government so they'll do as they're told. The United States government sends a small, tiny bit of money into Palestine, nowhere near what Israel gets, I might add. And they say, here, we'll give you these crumbs from our table, as long as you beg properly and do what we were told. I am hoping the Palestinian leadership will tell the United States, keep your money. Because it becomes more and more obvious that Israel will never grant permission for a Palestinian state, and the United States will never recognize a Palestinian state because they are under Israel's control. And they're using your money to commit these atrocities and horrors and war crimes. Your money. Now, over in Iraq... Oh, I'm sorry, we got a caller on the line. Stephen from Montreal. Aloha, Stephen. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
I like your website. That's really cool. And also, I wanted to say that I was wondering why you got on the other networks, you got crazy Zionist there screaming like a crazy person. And I'm kind of, because you're grounded, you know, and you tell it how you think it is. But also I'm wondering if you think that there are many conspiracies like agendas and all that, because you're kind of just focusing on bankers and, you know what I mean?
Well, I'm focusing on the ones which seem to be at the heart of all that we are having to endure and suffer. And obviously being here in the United States of America, and with the United States of America trying to lead the world into a new world war, those are the issues I'm going to focus on. And I know there are many other conspiracies and many other injustices and wrongs in the world, but I only have 2 hours a day to try and deal with these issues. And I know people write in and say, I do seem to stay focused on only a couple of topics, but right now they're very important that these topics get out and people understand the simplicity of the betrayal of the American people, first to the private central bank, and then in this sellout to the global government, and the fact that more and more it becomes obvious that the global government is not going to be controlled by any kind of a legislature like the United Nations, but even the United Nations is now bowing to Israel. And so we're on the verge of all of us being reduced to the level of the Palestinians. And I don't think that's a future that we want our children and grandchildren to have to live in.
Canada, it's true. I see it up here in Canada. They've already started to take over now.
I've been watching it. Well, they know the United States is close to collapse, and so like fleas on a dying dog, they're going to go find another dog, and unfortunately Canada is it. Yeah.
Anyway, thanks for your work, Mike, and wish you the best. I just wanted to clear that up, you know, because you really don't, sometimes you don't go well, you explained why, so it's okay.
Yeah. I know there's a lot of conspiracies, but my goal here is to basically head off this new world war, and I think sadly we're already in the first part of it.
Yeah.
And I know that the United States is going to lose it. We don't have the money, the soldiers, or the manufacturing. But the people who start these wars, they don't care which side wins or loses, because all the sides go into debt. And it's a huge moneymaker, and unfortunately, though, I don't want the United States to lose this next world war. And we're already losing it. Look around at the poverty in the streets of America, and you will realize we're already dying from the wartime economy.
It doesn't look good. Anyway, thank you very much for the site, certainly for the site, and also your show is kind of easier to... You know, you put it in an iPod, a friend's iPod, and it's easier for them to get it than that the other crazy person there on the Zionist crazy person on the other end.
Okay.
He's screaming like a fool, you know. So thank you for that.
All right. Well, thank you very much for the compliment, and I'll try and keep things level and logical and factual, and not go crazy screaming myself either. Okay? Thanks an awful lot. All right, we're coming up here to the end of the first hour. When we come back, Iraq is now saying they want the Americans to get out. It's an occupying force. They don't need us there anymore. Big fight brewing on that one. And believe it or not, the Department of Homeland Security is going to sell us a whole new round of scanners because they're warning us about body cavity bombs now. And, of course, it's nonsense and a joke. We'll be talking about that in the next hour. We'll be back after the news break in about 7 minutes. Stay tuned. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show, to hour number 2. And before we get back into the news and everything, we've got a caller on the line, Paul from Poker Face. Aloha, Paul. Give us a report. What happened with Freedom Palooza over the weekend?
All right, brother. Hey, thanks for having me up again. Freedom Palooza, there's 300 participants on Saturday. Sunday got washed out because it started raining Saturday night, like about 2, 3 in the morning. Two-thirds of the campers left by Sunday morning, and like half the speakers and half the bands canceled because everybody had left. And we got downpoured like 4 or 5 o'clock on Sunday. But on Saturday,
it's a plot. They used HARP. They used HARP to wreck you. I'm just kidding, of course.
Well, let me tell you something, Mike. The morning I woke up on Saturday was 7 a.m. and they were just going straight across, stayed to the triangle right above the place, and a freak storm happened on Sunday that wasn't supposed to happen. And Sunday afternoon, there was another helicopter that visited us, like it did up at Ed and Elaine Brown. So I'm going to forward you the tag number and see if you can find out for me which department or which branch of the government, or if it was the ADL even.
Well, you know something, I mean, something we have to understand right now, the weather on the entire planet is wacko because of the solar inactivity and I mean, here in Hawaii, we've got a thunderstorm overhead. We had snow on the Big Island. The ski resorts were open in California in July. I don't think you should take it personally. The weather is just very, very weird, and it's certainly not going in the direction that all the global warming occultists were insisting that it was going to go. They're trying to blame it on China now, so.
Well, the cool part of the afternoon on Saturday is Mr. James Traficant addressed the audience both days, actually. And on Sunday, I think he spoke for like maybe 40, 45 minutes, and he gave his view of a solution for America. And as soon as I get the videos back from our videographer, I'm going to put them up on YouTube and let the American people hear what a true president should be. And very excited for him. I tried to convince him, along with a few others, that he needs to run or at least get his own website going where he can have Jim Traficant speeches every day and Jim Traficant TV, you know?
I agree. I mean, I'd certainly link to it and carry it. I'd love to meet the gentleman. I think he got raked over the coals. When he stood up in Congress and said this nation is bankrupt, he was speaking the absolute truth. But unfortunately, truth is a capital crime in Washington, D.C., and those who try and speak the truth wind up in very, very serious trouble indeed.
And he recounted some of that on Saturday. So both videos will give a lot of insight about his character and what kind of man he is and why we should back him, more so than Ron Paul. I mean, Jim can talk about all the troubles, you know, and Ron Paul will touch certain issues. And, I have more. Well, let's
team them up.
More faith.
Let's make a ticket out of both of them, Ron Paul and Jim Traficant, and put them together. And, what a winning team that would be.
True. That'd be awesome. I was thinking Ron Paul more like Secretary of Treasury, man, and Helen Thomas as Secretary of State.
He'd be good at that as well. He'd be good at that as well. But they'll send somebody after him with a couple of pistols like they did Andrew Jackson. Those bankers, they play for keeps.
Right. If you print money outside of the banking cartel, they kill you. And if you take money away from them, like Jim did with his 1998 taxpayer Bill of Rights, well, then they put you in jail for 7 years. You know.
Well, look what happened when John F. Kennedy passed Executive Order 11110 and said the U.S. government is going to issue its own currency now, which was legal to do under the Constitution. 5 months later, he's shot dead, and the head of the World Bank is on the Warren Commission to keep a lid on things.
Oh, my God. Yeah, that part I didn't know. It was the IMF guy on there. Well, dude, you don't mess with the man's money. I mean, until we arrest all the bankers and put them in jail and forfeiture and seize their assets, it's going to continue happening.
Well, it can't go on the way
people want to happen. But
no, I was going to say, obviously, the situation cannot continue as it has up to this point. There's going to be a crisis. We don't know where. We're not exactly sure when, but there's going to be a really big rip in the whole system that they're not going to be able to bandage over, and it's all going to start coming apart. I mean, Moody's has downgraded Portugal's debt to junk. China's rating agency is saying the United States is already in default, and, of course, Greece is about ready to go, and more people are signing on to that idea of a boycott as punishment for being Israel's privateers with the aid flotilla.
Oh, yeah, that was disgusting what they did to the flotilla. But, Greece is the canary in the coal mine. All we have to do, the Western civilization, is repudiate the debts from these predatory lenders and say, like, you put this money in bad faith. It did not help the people. In fact, it burdened them more into debt. And I think there's a criteria that the U.S. uses to basically nullify debt around the world. So it's time to nullify all the debt from these gangster banksters.
It's absolutely true, but they're not going to give up without a fight, and they like to play dirty. But, you're talking about the principle of odious debt, and we talk about that on the show all the time, where there are debts that the people legitimately must pay for roads and schools and hospitals, but all these debts incurred for bailouts and war and TV cameras and all that stuff, we didn't agree to it. We shouldn't have to pay for it.
Exactly. So Freedom Palooza was a success. People had a good time. They want another one next year. So mark your calendars for the weekend before the 4th of July for 2012, and let's really rock it and, bring thousands of it. The formula's there. The place is great. The owner of the location loves having us. So bring your camping gear and, let's really celebrate our freedom. Might be the last year to do it.
Sounds really good. Well, you're going to be up in New Hampshire end of August, right?
At the Live Free or Die Festival, put on by Gene Coteau. It's the last weekend of the month of August, and it's in Jasper, New Hampshire. But Facebook, look up Live Free or Die Festival, and come join us up there.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. If you could email me that information, I'll make sure it gets posted at whatreallyhappened.com.
Mike, thank you for everything.
All right, you got it there, and good luck, and just keep kicking out there. And we're going to switch over to caller Ben from Nebraska. Aloha, Ben. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, today I was kind of reminiscing about the early 90s when I was in high school, and, when the first Bush was in power, I mean, you could not find any place where we were living at that time, which was in a suburb of Chicago, where there wasn't some kind of really good-sized protests going on. I mean, we'd go to downtown Chicago on the L train. I mean, we'd be going down there 2 or 3 times a week, and there'd be just these monster protests going on against the wars back then. And it just seems to me, I know I've talked about this on the show before, but it still mystifies me why we don't have protests of that caliber going on right now. I mean, it seems to me like a Republican has to be in office for there to be any protests going on,
I disagree, and I'll tell you what's going on. People are getting tired of protesting because it's become very painfully obvious the government is not listening. In an age where you have honest, accurate, fair elections, politicians would look out the window at all those protest signs and say that every one of those is a vote for my opponent next election unless I do something to make those people happy. Same thing with petitions. They'd look at the signatures on a petition and say, if I don't respond to this, then these people are going to vote for my opposition next election. But when you have a country with massive vote fraud, such as we have here in the United States of America, then protests are ignored, petitions are ignored, the politicians are saying, we don't have to listen to the voters. Free at last, thank God Almighty, we're free at last to take all the money from the corporations and special interests, and we don't have to pay attention to the voters. And so people they're beginning to understand the wisdom of what John F. Kennedy used to say. When peaceful revolution becomes impossible, violent revolution becomes inevitable. And I think we're in that transition stage right now. Even Claire Wolfe said, we're past that awkward phase. It is time to start shooting the bastards.
Well, I mean, and I agree with you, but what still mystifies me is I see these massive protests going on in these other countries where their vote fraud and other stuff is probably worse, if not just as bad as ours, and they've got just innumerable people out on the street, and I just
It could be the fluoride in the water. We know that fluoride, when you're drinking fluoride constantly, it's a tranquilizer. And the government was talking, the government was talking just a couple of weeks ago about putting lithium in the water supply to keep people, ostensibly to lower violent crime, but we know what they're really talking about is keeping us all doped up so that we don't stand up and have a revolution. And I'm beginning to wonder if that is in fact what's going on, because I too am mystified. We're seeing all these protests by the people in Greece. We're seeing major strikes by the people in Great Britain, Spain, Egypt, Iceland, and I'm wondering, there's drugs are the only possible explanation for why the American people are not allowing their anger to surface. Somebody's going around with these little dart guns like they use on Wild Kingdom and shoot the American guys in the rear end and just dope them up all the time. Seems the only explanation as far as I can see.
Yeah. Oh, and one more quick thing. It's kind of an interesting thing that I was listening to at a local coffee shop. This guy was complaining about, whenever he searches for news articles on the Internet, all he ever gets are blogs. And he was talking about, blogs aren't real news. They're not vetted and checked by a news editor. Why can't I just find real news? And I was thinking to myself, geez, maybe they have a gallon of lithium, for every 10 gallons of water already, because...
Yeah, the guy is basically in denial, and we got to take a break for commercials. Thank you for the call. We'll be right back.
Thank you.
And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. I want to get into this story here. It's just getting really, really bizarre out there. As you're probably aware, the TSA, the Tourism Suppression Agency, has been facing a great deal of criticism for the way they're treating our tourists and basically wrecking tourism. With numerous thefts of personal property, inappropriate touching of people. They had that ugly incident last week where they made this 85-year-old cancer victim remove her adult diaper before they'd let her on the airplane. At the same time, they let this guy without any documentation get on a plane and fly across the country. I mean, completely bogus situation. And our concern remains the scanners that they are using, which it turns out have never been tested for safety, are far more powerful than TSA initially claimed that they were. TSA is trying to say that the National Institutes of Standard and Technology tested these things. NIST came back and said, we don't do that kind of testing. We never tested these things. And why are you trying to claim that we say they're safe when we've said nothing at all about that? And it goes back and forth, and we have MIT and Johns Hopkins Medical University confirming that these scanners are, in fact, able to damage the DNA in your skin through a process called a molecular resonance. Little understood phenomenon until now, but basically the waves from these terahertz scanners will shake the DNA to the point where it starts disconnecting down the middle in those phosphate bonds. And that'll leave these bonds just sort of hanging out there, ready to interact with any other chemicals that are floating around inside your bodily cells. And these will in turn lead to transcription errors, which if they're not dealt with by the body's systems for dealing with damaged DNA, can lead to tumors and malignancy and cancer. And what underscored this is the fact that we are starting to see an increased incident of cancer among these TSA workers standing next to these scanners, like we're going to feel sorry for them after the way they've been abusing us all this time. But it is happening. And the TSA is saying, no, we're not going to give you dosimeters. Why should we do that? You know, never ask for information you really don't want to have. And the TSA does not want any monitoring whatsoever of the radiation around those scanners because they're looking at major, major lawsuits. But despite this, despite the problem that these scanners that are in the airports would never pass muster to go into a hospital to be used on people, now the Department of Homeland Security has launched a whole new scare story because I guess Michael Chertoff is kind of upset that all the airports have already bought the current generation of naked scanners. And my, oh my, what are we going to do to make buku bucks next year? So they're putting out this whole thing about how terrorists are going to attack us with body cavity bombs. They're going to have the bombs inside their body so the naked scanners can't work. So you're all going to have to buy these new full body, see all the way through them, X-ray machines to detect the bombs. That's what they're pushing. This is the next sales pitch. More expensive scanners, and the fact that these are definitely going to be giving cancer to travelers and the operators is irrelevant because the goal here is to make a ton of money. By the way, I'm getting these reports. Apparently, we're starting to see security gates set up as you exit the airplanes. That's how desperate they are to turn this into a jobs program. You're not only going to get groped and scanned getting on the airplane, when you get off the airplane, they make you run through it again. Like, what are you doing at, 30,000 feet that all of a sudden you're in danger? So they're doing this whole thing about the body cavity bombs because they want to sell a whole new batch of these all the way through body X-ray machines. Talk to any X-ray technician, and they're going to tell you if you're a regular traveler, this is an engraved, you're going to get cancer. You are going to get cancer from these. There's no way to avoid it. When you're getting zapped and zapped and zapped every time you get on or off an airplane or on a bus or into a train or going to a shopping mall, they're talking about setting this stuff up all over the place. You will get cancer. Maybe this is their way of population control, or maybe this is their way of turning the cancer industry into the next big profit center for American commerce. Everybody has cancer. They all have to go get cancer treatments, and it'll save the economy. No, it won't, because nobody's working. Nobody's making a product. We're just running around, scanning each other, then treating each other for the cancer the scanners give us. That's not commerce. That's a fraud. It's corruption. Now, there was this coastal town in California a few years ago that had a problem with a dead whale that washed up on the beach. And they had this brilliant idea. They were going to load it up with a whole bunch of dynamite, certainly far more than you could hide in various orifices of your body. And they were just going to blow it up, and that would be the end of it. And it turned out that flesh is actually quite resilient and absorbent of explosive concussion waves. And the whale did not dissolve into a zillion bloody little pieces to float away. It broke apart into maybe 2 or 3 pieces that came down basically smashing cars. It was a huge embarrassment and smelly all over that. Now, we all know from history of warfare how heroic or suicidal soldiers will save the other members of their platoon by throwing themselves onto an exploding hand grenade. And here is my point. A bomb hidden inside a body is not going to do much damage other than to the body itself. You may see it in movies like The Dark Knight, but that's just a movie. There really isn't a lot of empty space inside a human body with which to hide any kind of sizable, powerful explosives. And yes, an explosive inside the body, hidden up into the intestines or maybe poured into the stomach or something like that, will certainly kill the bomber. But there isn't going to be a lot of damage outside that. There'll be a little bit of blood and noise. Remember the crotch bomber? He's sitting on the bomb, and it's going to go off. It's not going to cause any damage. This is another hoax. It's another hoax to sell another generation of scanners because it's big business. It's the security industrial complex. And they don't care if you all come down with cancer because they're not going to have to pay your medical bills. They'll go to Congress and say, gee, we're sorry, we didn't know. Same thing they did with the shoe store fluoroscopes. And Congress will say, oh, yes, they meant well. Therefore, they don't have to pay your medical bills. And it's all about the money. And they don't care if you die because they're money junkies. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. A couple of stories here. First of all, I started to talk about this before. Over in Iraq, 100 Iraqi lawmakers have signed a document calling on their government to hold the United States government to their commitment to remove troops from the country at the end of this year. The Iraqi people want us gone. The Iraqi government wants us gone. The U.S. government promised they would be out of Iraq by the end of this year. That's the promise they made. We would leave when the people of Iraq wanted us to leave. How many times have we heard that? So, inevitably, 24 hours later, in a small town just outside Baghdad, there was a bombing at a municipal parking lot. 36 people dead, 54 wounded, and the White House is saying, see, you need us to stay. You need us to protect you from the bad old bombers. This kind of false flag crud just doesn't get any more obvious than that one. It's just amazing here. All right, I want to talk a little bit about Fukushima and radiation. There has been a fire at the Tokai nuclear power plant near Ibaraki in Japan, and it's significant because when the big quake tsunami meltdown happened 4 months ago, there was a second major release of radiation in the Tokai area that was never explained. It was on the maps, it was on the radiation sensors, it was a huge, huge spike. Not as bad as Fukushima, but it was there. And it was thought to either be coming from Tokai, which admitted a brief failure of one of their primary cooling systems, or nearby there's this nuclear fuel processing plant, which prior to Fukushima was the site of Japan's biggest nuclear accident. And nobody was saying anything. Now they're having a fire at that reactor. We're getting a story that apparently they're having a problem with a nuclear power station over in Tricastin, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, France. There's a fire there and a problem with the cooling systems of that reactor as well, and we're trying to get more information about that. It seems like the whole nuclear power industry has been allowed to cut corners and shave off safety to maximize their profits, and now the whole situation is fragile. And I'm sure probably a lot of these incidents normally would not be reported, except the whole world is... They're wondering what's going on, and the media is saying, oh, yeah, people want to read about this stuff. Now, the most disgusting thing that I saw today, and you'd think by now I'd be used to disgusting things like this. As we reported earlier, there are these areas where the radiation from Fukushima has been coming on shore, and we're seeing a rise in infant mortality. Significant. 35% increases. Huge, huge amount. Now, up in Canada, in West Canada, like we're seeing in the Pacific Northwest of the United States of America, there's been a spike in infant mortalities since Fukushima. the official conclusion of British Columbia's chief coroner is that radiation has nothing to do with the deaths. It must be the parents' fault. And this chief coroner, his name is Lapointe, says, we don't know why it's happening in this narrow span of time. We simply assume it must be the parents. Couldn't possibly be radiation. Canadian Pacific seafood is safe to eat. You will buy it, you will enjoy it, and it will not kill you. They're basically saying it's the parents' fault. I think that's nauseating to say. If you think it's the parents' fault, arrest them. Put them on trial for child endangerment or child homicide. But don't take these grieving parents who've lost their babies and say, we think maybe it was your fault. We don't have any proof. We're just going to presume it's your fault because we don't, you're just doing it to make the nuclear power industry look bad. Just when you think the propaganda from the powers that be cannot get any more cynical, something like this will really happen. Now, interestingly, there's been this lawsuit situation. We all know that one of the things that really kind of messed up our society was this whole so-called affirmative action program. And it was designed to basically correct the fact that there was a lot of prejudice going on. People are discriminated against. Okay. Okay, are we back? Okay, I guess we're back. Yes. All right. And so anyway, there's this Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals, which covers Michigan and Ohio, basically came out with this ruling saying that equal treatment under the law is still unfair, and the only way to have fairness in our society is to keep race-based hiring quotas in place. And it's that kind of Orwellian double thinking that really kind of confuses people. All right, we got let's see, caller on the line, George from Texas. Aloha, George. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
How you doing, Mike?
Well, hanging in there, dealing with some brownouts and other technical issues.
But the thing is, I don't know when the American public's going to push back, especially on this TSA issue, because they know they're unpopular, but they keep pushing and pushing and pushing. And and the thing is, in Texas, it's like I don't really, because right now we had almost statewide burn bans. We couldn't shoot off fireworks. They didn't have fireworks.
They banned them here in Hawaii. It was more like a funeral than a celebration, and everybody's unhappy. But Well,
I felt like Texas didn't deserve to celebrate the 4th of July for one reason. We didn't push our legislatures hard enough to pass that anti-groping bill. We had, and the thing is, right now it's like we just showed weakness to the federal government. That we will back down.
Yeah, and as long as we keep doing that, as long as we do that, as long as we go along, you know how bullies are. The more you give in to bullies, the more they'll bully you. Inevitably, we're going to have to stand up and punch the bully in the nose and give him a good bloody nose and say, stop it. That's the only way bullies ever stop being bullies. They have to have a bloodied and broken nose. That's absolute historical fact. There's never been a tyrant who got up one morning and said, I've really been rough enough on the people. I think I'm going to back off a little bit. There's never been a bully who gets up and says, I'm really sorry I was beating the crud out of you every day for your lunch money. They just go and they're sociopaths. These are psychologically damaged people that get into government. Politics always attracts the people who shouldn't be allowed that kind of power, and yet they get in there. They're excellent liars because they feel no guilt whatsoever, and they take and take and take and take. The strong take, the weak surrender. Only when the people stand up and say no more is it going to change or is it going to end. And that's just absolutely what's going on. I don't know why the American people aren't rioting in the streets yet. I'm at a complete loss to understand it. It's got to be drugs in the water, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, the thing is, one of the legislative aides they were talking about, some of the legislators were talking about, the real ones, at least tried something. They said, if Obama would have barred air traffic over Texas, they said then they wanted to go put Constantine wire around every federal building in Texas and say, you can't come out.
I think that would have been a good thing to do. I think if the TSA was going to come in and say, we're not going to let planes in and out of there, I would have said, okay, we secede. You don't have any authority here anymore. All right, we got to take a break there. George, stay with me. I'm going to take you into the next segment. Stay with us through the commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the last segment of our show today here. And before we go back to George in Texas, I want to relate a story. When I was a small kid growing up in New England farmland, I had a whole bunch of uncles on my mother's side of the family who had served in Europe during World War II. And I guess I was kind of unique among my generation of kids. I found their stories of what they'd been through quite fascinating, and I still have my grandfather's World War I helmet and his gas mask that was supplied by the lowest bidder that let the mustard gas right through to take out one of his lungs. Thank you, manufacturing. And a bunch of captured medals and armbands and stuff from the whole World War II European theater. And they were telling me all these stories about what they'd seen and experienced, and a lot of it was direct contradiction to what we were being taught in the schools. And they went out of their way to say, what they're telling you in the school about XYZ is a lie. This is what was really going on. And I listened very, very carefully to a lot of that stuff. But I remember as a kid, and you know, I'm like, 8 years old at the time, and I remember thinking, how could the German people just sit there and let their government drag them into a world war, and when it was obvious they were losing and on the wrong side of history, just sit there and just let their country dissolve around them and not do anything about it? And I had a very, very low opinion of the German people, that they could just sit there and allow their government and their leadership to commit all these atrocities that are going on. And now I'm getting an education how that happened, because I look around at my fellow Americans, and our government is dragging us into the New World War. We have torture. We have concentration camps. We have endless propaganda. We have the new Gestapo, the blue shirts, groping us and x-raying us everywhere we go, and just demanding, your papers, please, comrade, please, get in the scanner. We got to see you naked before you can go to the airplane. And we're there. We're there. We're the Fourth Reich right here. And the American people who love to wave flags and say we're the land of the free and the home of the brave are doing nothing about it. 1776, give me liberty or give me death. 2011, give me the remote and I'll be happy. How far we have fallen from the character of the men and women who created this nation 235 years ago. There are many times when I'm absolutely ashamed, not just of my government for the crimes that it commits, but for my fellow Americans who sit there for the most part and hope that somebody else is going to fix the problem, or that some deity will come down and make everything happen, or that the superheroes TV always promises them are about to show up to fix things, will fix it. And it's not going to happen. Batman is not coming to save the situation. The cavalry is not going to ride over that hill. There is no Superman. If you want a heaven or hell, you have to make it yourself on this planet right here and right now. And the longer you sit and do nothing, the more toward hell we are all going, in a very, very real sense. This isn't a movie. This isn't a TV show. It's not a stage play. This is real. We are the Fourth Reich in this country. Our government has been following Hitler's playbook all along. Dictatorship for dummies, Adolf Hitler. A phony terror attack, a false flag, a religious group that is targeted as a scapegoat. We are repeating the history of Nazi Germany in the United States of America. And I think it is a mark of the complete failure or subversion of our nation's public education system that most Americans still don't see it. And I grieve for the fact that it looks like the American people are going to have to go through the poverty and starvation and disease and deprivation that the German people had to go through, because they didn't stand up and tell the Nazis, okay, you've gone far enough. No more. It's time to draw a line, because we are losing, and we're going to lose more unless we stop now. And I get very, very frustrated that I can see clearly what the end result of our current course as a nation is going to be, and it is a disaster for America and Americans. And I'm trying to find some way to just divert it or pull it back from the brink or slam on the brakes. And I'm angry at a government that knows full well what they're going to do to this country. And they don't care. They'll take their money and skedaddle someplace else, and they'll be happy because they got all the gold and all the goodies and all the hot and cold running interns that they can molest to their heart's content. And just like TSA not caring if their new full-body scanners are going to give you cancer, they just care about their stock dividend checks. They want their goodies. They don't care about you. You're just cattle to them. You're the herd, the great unwashed, the masses that must be managed, not respected. We're not civilized. We're domesticated. And that's how they see us. Anyway, I've yacked enough. George, what's on your mind?
All right, I can tell you one thing. You're talking about Texas seceding. I tell you, back a couple years ago, many Texans were like, well, we'll give it a chance. But now today, it's more like many Texans I talk to is like, they're starting to say, Texas is better off without the United States. We can do better without.
We're all better off without the United States, except for people getting a federal government paycheck. Everybody in America's life would be improved if the federal government vanished. The debt would go away. This forced obeisance to Israel would go away. The wars would go away. The hate of the rest of the world would go away. We're all better off without the federal government. I can't think of a reason to support the federal government in any way, shape, or form, because all it's going to mean is more debt, more poverty, more enslavement, and more war for everybody. It's a bad idea. It's a failed experiment. It's time to cut our losses and call it quit.
Well, I just, if they raise the debt ceiling, I think this will bring on the collapse of the United States government.
Absolutely.
People think, oh, well, if it's going to collapse and it's going to be a depression, they're going to have this police state. But if you look at the old Soviet Union, the police state collapsed along with the Soviet Union, too.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Following the revolution in Romania, they had a better country. Following the revolution in Iceland, they're getting a better country. Their economy is doing just fabulous. They told the IMF to go jump in a volcano, and they're doing really good. When the Soviet Union collapsed, they had a couple of months of confusion. The new Russian republics, it's a happening place economically. If they hadn't been so tied in tightly with this whole globalist economy and this debt-based currency coming from the IMF, they'd be in a sweet position over there. But all these other countries that are suffering economically are doing so only because they got suckered into the mortgage-backed security fraud on Wall Street, and they allowed their economies to all get tangled up with the IMF, which is just a bigger version of the Federal Reserve Ponzi scheme. And countries are starting to delink. Egypt is saying, we don't want to have anything to do with the IMF. Iceland's saying the same thing. Every one of these countries where the revolution succeeds, they're going to say the same thing. We want to take care of our own business. The globalists have to go away. They created this mess. We're starting to see the Eurozone fracture. Denmark is putting up border controls on their border with Germany. Germany's high court may rule that all these bailouts to Greece are illegal anyway, and that's going to bring down Greece, and the whole euro is going to fracture now. It's all coming apart at the seams. And good. Globalism was a bad idea right from the start. We need regionalism. We need communities taking care of themselves, and we shouldn't have auto factories in North America shut down because they're still waiting for parts from Japan. That's a bad idea. It's great if you are in charge of the shipping lanes and you're sitting astride that line of communication, because then everybody's dependent on you. But monopolies and dependency are a way for rich people to get richer and wreck the rest of the world. And we need to get away from that. We need not one global government. We need 1,000 little tiny regional governments all over the planet. Everybody taking care of themselves.
The good news about these people, these tyrants, these globalists,
yep.
They're going to self-destruct. That's just a matter of time.
They're doing it right now. The problem is they're taking us with them.
Well, they ain't going to take me with them. Well, thank you, Mike.
Well, all right, you got it. Yeah, it's all time for us to get out our little parachutes there and say, yes, I refuse to go with you. If you want to blow yourselves up, go ahead. But the problem is the people out there saying, yes, let's blow things up. They blow up other people. They very rarely get caught in their own wars. Everybody in Washington, D.C. shouting for war with Iran and all the rest. They're not going. They're not going to go. Their kids aren't going to go. They're creating wars for profit that your children will die in. And by the way, I did on What Really Happened this morning, I put up that video about the congressional hearing into the military's practice of pressuring, coercing, and in some cases actually torturing, locking guys up in closets for like 30 days to get them to sign waivers after they've been wounded in in service to this country. They've been wounded permanently. And they're being pressured to sign waivers saying, oh, my long-term medical conditions were pre-existing, so the government doesn't have to pay my medical care anymore. That's obscene. You ought to take that video, make a copy of it. If you know anybody who's considering enlisting in the military services, you need to show them that video. You need to show them that video. You need to show them the article where it says that recruiters are allowed to lie to you and you cannot take them to court because it's a lie. The courts have said, yeah, the recruiters are allowed to say anything at all to get your kid to sign that paper. And then once he signs the paper, he belongs to the government and they can do whatever they want with him, including marching him into the aftermath of a nuclear bomb in Nevada, which they've done once, just to see what would happen. And what happened, of course, was cancer and leukemia. The people who are in charge of this military situation are psychotic. They're drunk with power. They're drunk with your money. They're sociopaths. You have to be to start a war on other countries as a good business option. And before we hit the end of the show here, a little comment. The United States of America, even in this time of severe economic stress, the Congress has raised the military budget one more time. The United States spends more on the machinery of death, 7 times more than any other country on earth. America's budget for the machinery to kill our fellow human beings is equal to that of Russia, China, and the rest of NATO all put together. A lot of it doesn't work. It's just a waste of money. The Army's $2.7 billion computer system to get intelligence information down to the tactical level in the field does not work. When the search engine is working, it's producing bogus results. Maybe that's why so many innocent people are being killed all over the Middle East. Vista. Death by Vista. The computer system does not work. But remember, the families of all those people who got blown to bloody bits because of a computer error, they only hate us for our freedoms. They only hate us because we're free. If we're free, we have the freedom to say no. There is no freedom without the freedom to say no. The time to say no is now. And on that, we're going to sign off for today. We'll be back tomorrow here on the Rense Radio Network. Until then, stay safe, stay angry, stay skeptical, stay aware, stay informed, and aloha, America.